The snow fell in thick, oppressive flakes, blanketing the small town of Evergreen in an eerie silence. Clara Matthews trudged through the accumulating snow towards Evergreen High School. The wind whipped around her, carrying whispers that seemed to echo her deepest fears. As she approached the looming brick building, a shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Clara's mind wandered to the events of the past few weeks. The once cheerful atmosphere of the teacher's lounge had morphed into something sinister. Her colleagues, once friendly faces, now bore grotesque smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Their gazes, cold and calculating, followed her every move. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she pushed open the heavy doors, the warmth of the school did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled in her bones. The hallways, usually bustling with life, were eerily quiet. Clara's footsteps echoed off the lockers, each sound amplifying her growing sense of unease. Entering the teacher's lounge, Clara was met with a chorus of forced laughter. Her colleagues huddled around a table, their faces contorted in what could only be described as malicious glee. At the center of the table sat a pile of wrapped gifts, each tagged with a teacher's name. "Clara, just in time for our Secret Santa exchange," chirped Sarah, the English teacher. Her smile was too wide, her teeth too sharp. Clara's stomach churned as she approached the group. I didn't know we were doing Secret Santa this year," Clara stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, it's a tradition," replied Mark, the history teacher. His eyes glinted with something Clara couldn't quite place. "You're new here, so you wouldn't know. But trust me, it's unforgettable." The group's laughter sent chills down Clara's spine. She watched in horror as her colleagues began to exchange gifts. With each unwrapping, the atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive. Sarah's gift, a beautifully bound book, contained pages filled with her most embarrassing moments, including intimate details she'd never shared. Mark received a replica of his father's war medal, tarnished and bent, a cruel reminder of his family's disgrace. As each gift was revealed, Clara saw the light dim in her colleague's eyes, replaced by a haunted look she recognized all too well. It was the same look she saw in the mirror every morning, a reflection of the loneliness and fear that had plagued her since childhood. Clara's mind raced, memories flooding back of her own painful past. The countless nights spent alone in foster homes, the whispered taunts of classmates, the crushing weight of never belonging. She'd thought she'd left that all behind, but now it seemed to be closing in on her from all sides. Days passed, and Clara found herself consumed by the need to uncover the truth behind this twisted tradition. She began to investigate, staying late at school, rifling through old records, and eavesdropping on hushed conversations. With each piece of information she gathered, the horror of the situation became clearer. The Secret Santa tradition she discovered dated back decades. It had started as a harmless gift exchange, but had morphed into something far more sinister. Each year, the participants delved deeper into each other's psyches, unearthing fears and traumas to craft increasingly cruel gifts. The tradition had claimed victims over the years. Teachers who couldn't handle the psychological torment, who had disappeared or worse. As Christmas Eve approached, Clara's paranoia reached a fever pitch. She'd gathered evidence of her colleagues' involvement, documenting their cruel acts and the suffering they'd caused. But with each revelation, she felt the noose tightening around her own neck. That night, as snow piled up outside her window, Clara received a text message. "Your gift is ready. Come to the school, now." Her heart pounding, Clara bundled up and ventured out into the storm. The school loomed before her, a dark silhouette against the swirling snow. As she approached, she saw a faint light flickering in one of the windows. With trembling hands, she unlocked the main entrance and stepped inside. The hallways were pitch black, save for a thin line of light spilling from beneath the door to the teacher's lounge. Clara's footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, each sound amplifying her terror. As she pushed open the door, She was greeted by the sight of her colleagues gathered in a semicircle, their faces illuminated by candlelight. In the center of the room sat a single gift-wrapped box. "Open it," Sarah hissed, her eyes gleaming with malice. Clara's hands shook as she tore away the wrapping paper. Inside the box was a USB drive. With growing dread, she plugged it into the nearby computer. The screen flickered to life, and Clara found herself staring at a montage of the worst moments of her life. There she was, a scared little girl cowering in a closet as foster parents screamed outside. There she was again, a teenager, alone at prom, watching as couples swayed on the dance floor. And finally, there she was now, in this very room, opening the gifts that had tormented her colleagues. "How?" Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "How did you know?" Mark stepped forward, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "We've been watching you, Clara. We've seen your loneliness, your fear. It's what drew us to you. You see, we're all alone here, but misery loves company." Clara's mind reeled as the implications of his words sank in. This wasn't just about tormenting each other. It was about creating a twisted family, bound together by shared trauma and cruelty. In that moment, something inside Clara snapped. Years of pent-up anger and fear exploded outward. With a primal scream, she lunged at Mark, her nails raking across his face. Blood welled up in thin lines as he stumbled backward. The room erupted into chaos. Sarah grabbed Clara from behind, her bony fingers digging into Clara's arms. Clara threw her head back, feeling the crunch of cartilage as her skull connected with Sarah's nose. Clara fought like a cornered animal, lashing out at anyone who came near. She felt bones crack under her fists, tasted blood in her mouth. The room spun around her in a blur of violence and screams. When it was over, Clara stood panting in the center of the room, surrounded by the broken and bleeding bodies of her colleagues. The realization of what she'd done crashed over her like a wave. As sirens wailed in the distance, Clara sank to her knees, laughter bubbling up from deep within her chest. She understood now. The true horror wasn't in the gifts or the cruel games. It was in the realization that she was just like them, broken, alone, and capable of unspeakable cruelty. The police found her there, still laughing, surrounded by the carnage she'd created. As they led her away in handcuffs, Clara caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window. The face that stared back at her wore the same grotesque smile she'd seen on her colleagues' faces weeks ago. In the end, Clara had received the cruelest gift of all, the knowledge that she'd always belonged here, in this twisted family of broken souls. As the police car pulled away from the school, Clara closed her eyes, finally feeling at home in the darkness that had always lived inside her. The snow continued to fall, covering the town in a blanket of white, hiding the horrors that lay beneath. And in homes across Evergreen, teachers prepared for next year's Secret Santa, eager to welcome a new member into their fold.